Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. On our program, troubling new findings about Santa Clara County's jails, this weekend's Democratic State Convention in San Jose, and dog owners feeling bitten by new national park rules. But first, an update on homelessness in San Francisco. Today is the deadline for homeless people to clear out of an encampment on Division Street in San Francisco. Officials posted a notice to vacate on Tuesday, giving 72 hours to leave the area. The tents have become a target of complaints from neighbors and businesses and a public relations dilemma for Mayor Ed Lee. We talked to Linda Fuchs, who currently lives in a tent on Division Street, about potentially being moved to a homeless shelter at Pier 80.
No, I don't want to go to Pier 80. I don't think it's even feasible. Why should you have an ultimatum either to go to jail or go to Pier 80? You know, we have rights. So as long as they're not making any kind of violation in society or doing anything inappropriate or crime-like, we shouldn't have to go. As long as we're people that want to make it off these streets, why can't we be free to make our own decision? If we're not doing anything to the public, you know, they shouldn't bug us. Don't put me in the same category as those that do stuff that is wrong. I'd rather be on the streets. It would give me the opportunity to try to maneuver and take care of business rather than living under someone else's law until I get our place. It's too difficult to be living under someone's circumstances and their regulations where it blocks you from taking care of your business. You know, especially those that want to get off the streets, that have the drive to get off the streets and do something more with their lives than they already have.
Joining me now is KQED's Stephanie Martin-Taylor, who has been following this story. Stephanie, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Thuy.
As we mentioned, the deadline is today. That tent city on Division Street is one of several around the city. Why? And they've been around for months, actually. Why is the city doing this now?
Well, the city says it's simply gotten too dangerous for public health. There are needles on the ground, feces, they found rats, and there's been a public outcry from local business owners and residents who say something needs to be done about these dozens and dozens of tents that are out there and show no signs of leaving.
So where will the homeless be moved to?
Well, the city has set up a temporary shelter at Pier 80, which is south of the ballpark. It's about 3.5 miles from the city center. Its capacity is 150, although Supervisor Malia Cohen, who represents that area, says that there is potential for more beds to be put in. But a lot of the homeless people, like we just saw, don't want to go. So that's been the city's challenge, is coaxing these people to take what's offered. And even if everyone did take what's offered, there aren't enough beds available.
And also, they can only stay there temporarily. It's not a permanent solution, Pier 80.
No, it's not. It's only a night or two, and then they're on to other options, other shelters around the city. So a lot of the people I spoke with today, they've been in the shelter system before, and they don't like this constantly coming and going and being displaced and being moved around to other parts of the city, so they'd prefer to stay in their tents.
And so critics have made that very point, that this is simply moving the problem around, and advocates for the homeless have said this is criminalizing homelessness. What happens at this point? I mean, what about those who refuse to go? What happens to them?
Well, I think the city is trying very hard to avoid a public relations nightmare where we see images of the police coming in and arresting people. So they are trying a very soft approach and really putting their homeless outreach team out in the field, trying to talk to people, coax them into services. But that's the big question, is ultimately how long, if people refuse to leave or they just continue moving on to other neighborhoods, how long can this go on? How long can San Francisco as a city sustain this, these little tent cities that pop up?
Will police arrest them ultimately if they don't move on?
It's illegal to camp. Yes, they could, but we don't know. We haven't heard anything really, a really strong point of view from the police department. Police Chief Greg Sir has his own public relations issues that he's dealing with right now, and he has not come out and said forcefully that yes, we will arrest people who stay.
You mentioned that public outcry has been growing over this, especially over the sanitary conditions, the declining sanitary conditions. Mayor Lee's poll numbers have been dropping. Does politics play into this?
Oh, absolutely. Mayor Lee has had a really tough time around the Super Bowl, and he was quoted as saying that the homeless would have to leave the streets. He would say that that was misinterpreted, that he was talking about the area around Super Bowl City on the Embarcadero, but that was widely interpreted as meaning that he wanted to sweep everybody off the streets out of view of tourists and other visitors. And so, yeah, so now he's got to deal with this tent city, which many people say is a symbol of everything that is wrong with San Francisco's homeless policies and its inability to serve all these people who need help.
And just real quickly, speaking of homeless policies, the city spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year on services for the homeless, nearly $250 million this fiscal year alone. Any reason to think that the homeless dilemma will be solved this time? Many mayors have tried.
Yeah, they have. I think a lot of that hinges on Mayor Lee's proposal, and which is being acted on, to create a Department of Homeless Services, putting all the services that the city currently has under one roof. Philadelphia has done it, New York has done it, Salt Lake City has done it with success, and a strong department is what's needed.
All right, we'll see how that goes here. Stephanie Martin-Taylor, thank you.
Thank you.
A new report on Santa Clara County's troubled jails has some alarming findings. Widespread inmate complaints of excessive force, filthy living conditions, and inadequate medical care. The analysis found a broken grievance system that allows complaints to be hidden or ignored. Calls for jail reform intensified after mentally ill inmate Michael Tyree was allegedly beaten to death by 3 correctional officers last year. And last month, a former inmate filed a lawsuit contending he was beaten by guards. A Blue Ribbon Commission was formed to help improve the jails. And joining us now is the commission's chair, retired Judge LaDoris Cordell. Judge Cordell, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, your panel commissioned this latest report. Nearly 1,000 inmates were interviewed. Your response to the findings?
Well, first of all, I just want to make clear that people understand that jails are a place where people go, one, to be punished. So they're not meant to be a place where you can just go and have a good time. And also, half the population, or more than half, are there not convicted of any crimes. So they're basically pre-trial, waiting to go to trial because either they did not get bail or were denied bail. That being said, we asked our consultant to go into the jails and speak with whomever the consultants could speak with. So a total of 11 attorneys went into the jails. There's Main Jail North, South, and then there's Elmwood located in Milpitas, a women's facility, and then the men's facility and a minimum camp. It was stunning at how many inmates were willing to talk to these lawyers. And most of them wanted anonymity because they were concerned about retaliation from the custodial officers or the guards.
Sure.
But they talked to 944 inmates and talked to some correctional officers and some family members. And so these aren't really findings, they're really just reporting back and saying this is what the inmates are saying, what they're experiencing in the jails.
And what was your reaction upon hearing what the inmates were saying about the jails?
I think I can speak for all of our commission members to say that we were stunned. We were really taken aback by the kinds of things that were being said. And so, for example, we were told that, for example, some of the worst medical care is given for women at the women's facility in Elmwood. And we heard talk about miscarriages, which, according to the inmates, could have been avoided and should have been avoided had they been given the proper care. We heard concerns about the lack of psychiatric services, inmates not getting their meds when they should. And then we heard about the grievance process. We heard about sanitation in the jails, where inmates get one change of underwear a week. And during the process that this commission has met, the sheriff actually has ordered that inmates get their underwear more frequently during the week. Mm.
We want to point out that we did ask Sheriff Lori Smith to come on the show. Her department did not respond to us, but the sheriff has released a statement in the past on this issue. Earlier this week, she said her department is already working on making changes. She said, in part, quote, "We are installing locked grievance collection boxes in our facilities so that inmates feel safe in making a complaint, and we will implement a tracking process to ensure those complaints don't fall on deaf ears. We have reinstituted pre-shift squad meetings so that our custody deputies hear directly about issues and concerns from the previous shift." Are you satisfied with her response?
Well, it's certainly not bad. But no, it doesn't go nearly far enough. So let me just take one example, the grievance boxes. So if you're an inmate, you have a complaint, there's a form that you can get, you're given. You fill it out, and it might be a complaint against a specific guard. So before there were no grievance boxes, you just had to hand it in. And sometimes it would go to the very person about whom you were complaining. So now there are these boxes. I'm not sure how many there are. And so the idea is they're locked, so the inmate can put the complaint in, and then somebody has to open the boxes. And the hope is it's someone higher up in the chain of command, so that not your average, the guard can actually get access to it. Well, I've just recently received information within the last 48 hours that at least one sergeant, and that's a step up from being an officer, has opened up the box, taken out the complaint, actually read it, shown it to the particular officer who is being complained about. So the problem still exists. So more has to be done than just putting some boxes throughout the jails.
A number of scandals have happened under Sheriff Smith's watch. This issue, but also the Michael Tyree case that we had mentioned. Also, 2 guards are accused of beating a shackled inmate so severely that his jaw was permanently disfigured. How would you assess Sheriff Smith's job performance?
The jails came under the sheriff's purview in 2010. So there's been 5 years in which they're now under the supervision of the sheriff's department. And just looking at what we have found so far, I have some very serious concerns about what has happened in the jails under her leadership. It's not personal. I know the sheriff. I don't dislike her at all. But if we're talking about business here and about what your responsibility is to run the jails and to see that guards behave correctly and that inmates are treated in a humane fashion, clearly what we have found so far raises all kinds of red flags.
Should she step down?
I'm not going to say anything at this point about whether or not she should step down, but I will tell you that the issue of leadership is certainly going to be a topic of discussion among the commission members when we determine what recommendations we're going to bring forward.
Your commission is set to make your final recommendations on April 12th, and then after that you will be disbanded. Do you think that there is additional review needed after that? Should there be an independent oversight committee or some kind of entity set up?
Right. So I will make a report on behalf of the commission to the Board of Supervisors on April 12th at their supervisors meeting. That's on a Tuesday. And it's my view that there has to be an ongoing look at everything that's happened, especially if the board adopts the recommendations from the commission. Somebody has to see that they're implemented. Now, I will tell you that I'm personally in favor of independent civilian oversight, a sort of monitor of the jails in Santa Clara County. That's just me. I don't know how the commission will feel about it. But absolutely, there has to be oversight independent of the sheriff's department to hold that department accountable and to hold leadership accountable.
And just real quickly, at one point you had threatened to quit the commission because the county had hired a consulting firm to review the jail system, but produce a report that would not be public. But you're satisfied that that's been resolved?
No, it hasn't. Actually, that consultant is there. They're doing a secret report. We're covering information that the consultant is not covering.
All right. Judge LaDoris Cordell, always good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
California Democrats kick off their statewide convention today in San Jose. It's expected to set the stage for key races, including the contest to replace longtime U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer, who is retiring. The top Democratic contenders to take her seat are Attorney General Kamala Harris and Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez. Here now with more on this and other top political stories of the week is Scott Schaefer, KQED's Politics and Government Senior Editor. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Thuy.
Okay, so besides the Senate race, what else is on the convention agenda? Because Democrats control just about every statewide office from the governor on down. Is there much work to do?
Well, this is the last big meeting before the primary in June, and so there's a lot of organizing that goes on. There's all these caucuses. Every imaginable group gets together and talks. It's also time to talk about becoming a delegate for the national convention in July for the presidential campaign. And, you know, there's also people getting trained and organizing volunteers, those kinds of things, just really gearing up for the June primary and then the big event in November.
What about party endorsements? Are those up for grabs?
They are, and that is probably the most important thing that's going to be happening this weekend. You mentioned the U.S. Senate race. Barbara Boxer is retiring after 24 years. And it's tough to get a party endorsement in a contested race where there's no incumbent, which is what this is, because you have to get 60% of the delegates plus one. If anyone can do that this weekend, it'll be Kamala Harris. She's been traveling all over the state trying to lock down all those votes from delegates. Her people are downplaying, they're lowering expectations, but there is a chance that she could do that. And it'll be probably a victory for Loretta Sanchez if she can just block Harris from getting the endorsement. It's a little tough because, in part, you can vote no endorsement, and therefore it's tougher to get that 60% threshold.
So no incumbent in that race, but there in San Jose, there is a race where there is an incumbent, Mike Honda, squaring off again against Ro Khanna. What's going on in that race?
That has been, as it was last time, a very bitter fight. And Honda did not get an early endorsement. You need to get 70% of the delegates when they met earlier this year. He did not get that. Now, if he can just get 50% of the delegates this weekend, he will get that endorsement, and he probably will. But just the fact that he's struggling even to get that kind of an endorsement for an incumbent is not a good sign for him. Khanna is running a very aggressive campaign. He's raised more money than Honda. He's lining up some endorsements, and President Obama this week said he's not going to get involved in that race. Last time he endorsed Honda, which was a boost. This time he's going to sit it out. There is an ethics investigation of Mike Honda in the House, and I think that's giving some people sort of cold feet.
What about Ami Bera?
Ami Bera is not running contested. He's the congressman from up in the Sacramento area. And he's taken some fairly conservative positions on things like the Pacific Trade Agreement, which he supports. That makes organized labor very unhappy. So he also was denied that early endorsement. And he'll probably get it. Again, it's just 50% plus one, but I think they're making him sweat it out a bit because they're not happy with him.
There's also a presidential primary in June. Will Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders show up?
No, they will not be there. They got something going on tomorrow in South Carolina.
Oh, just a little thing called the Super Tuesday, I think.
That's Tuesday, and then South Carolina is tomorrow, Saturday. So they're very busy. But the vice president will be there, and he's a big favorite of the rank and file Democrats. So he'll be there. But no Bernie, no Hillary.
Well, Joe Biden is having sort of an interesting week, right? He was at UCSF earlier, and then he'll be at the convention this weekend, and then he's going to the Oscars?
Yeah, that's all just, the convention's just kind of a warm-up. He's going to be at the Oscar ceremony in Los Angeles. He's introducing Lady Gaga, who's going to be singing a song from a nominated Best Original Song from a film about sexual assault on campus, which is a big issue for Joe Biden, as it was going all the way back to his days in the Senate.
Now, in addition to the Democratic convention, another big issue in state politics this week, Governor Brown is now appealing a Superior Court ruling against his initiative to make certain nonviolent felons eligible for early parole. Take us through this battle quickly.
So the governor made that announcement in January, and it was immediately opposed by the district attorneys. They then filed a lawsuit saying that what the governor did was he took a pending ballot measure on juvenile justice, added all this stuff about sentencing, and
for adults,
and so paired it with the juvenile stuff, but didn't give any time for the public to comment on this new version. Now, Brown says this was just an amendment to an existing ballot measure. The DAs are saying, no, this is a whole new thing. You got to start at the beginning. You can't jump in the middle. And this judge in Sacramento this week agreed with the district attorneys, so now the governor and the attorney general are appealing to the state Supreme Court. It was really a slap of the hand also of the AG, Kamala Harris. The judge said she should not have accepted those changes because it really was a whole new ballot measure. So now it goes to the state Supreme Court, where Brown has 3 of the 7 appointees. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
And finally, former State Senator Leland Yee this week was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And of course, he was caught up in the whole FBI sting of Raymond Shrimp Boy Chow. He was sentenced for exchanging political favors for campaign contributions. Do you think this finally puts a lid on that one chapter, and how has it changed the Democratic Party?
Well, Leland Yee was never a favorite among Democrats up in Sacramento. He was always regarded as kind of a showboat and a little bit of a lone wolf on certain issues, so I don't think there were a lot of tears shed. That said, his getting caught up in the sting happened when other controversies and scandals were happening up in Sacramento, and so there's actually a ballot measure in June which the legislature put on allowing them to suspend members of the legislature when they're caught up in these kinds of ethics problems. So it's had that impact. The Democrats also lost their supermajority up there in one of the houses after the scandal broke. So it has had an impact on the party. But you know, there's also the district attorney in San Francisco, George Gascon, is doing a local investigation, not into Leland Yee, but into some of the others who were caught up in that investigation by the FBI. So we haven't seen the final chapter yet on this story.
And that is definitely ongoing. In the meantime, you take off, I think, tonight for the State Democratic Convention in San Jose.
Well, they told me I was going to the Oscars.
Really?
I'm going to the convention?
Clearly, you need a better representative around this station in terms of what assignments you get.
Yes, I will be in San Jose. You are correct.
It's just as good. I live in San Jose.
Yeah.
I love San Jose.
Here, the Tech Museum's fantastic.
It's fabulous, along with lots of other things.
Good.
Scott Schaefer, thanks so much.
You bet.
This week, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area proposed new rules for walking dogs off-leash at popular sites such as Fort Funston and Christie Field in San Francisco. The rules would limit where dogs can run freely to 5 locations within the park's 80,000 acres. Dog owners are crying foul, while environmentalists see the restrictions as necessary to protect wildlife and sensitive habitats. The controversy has been brewing for more than a decade and was featured in this PBS NewsHour story from October by Spencer Michaels.
They're trying to get rid of the recreational mandate. We were promised this land would stay with the traditional recreational uses of the land, and now they're going back on their promises. Basically, what the Park Service is planning to do will amount to the largest loss of public access in the G-Gen history.
While most national parks include wilderness areas, the battleground here is a stunning compilation of government-owned properties. The Presidio of San Francisco, a repurposed Army base, is part of the park, as is Fort Funston, a coastal battery now used for hang gliding and dog walking along popular trails near the beach. And there's Ocean Beach, where the continent ends. Off-leash dogs are allowed, but would be curtailed under proposed rules.
And joining us now to discuss this some more is Christine Leonard, Superintendent of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Chris, welcome.
Nice to be with you. Thank you so much.
First of all, for those who don't know what the Golden Gate National Recreation Area is, can you describe this national park and tell us what sets it apart from other national parks?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Golden Gate National Recreation Area was established in 1972. If you look at the National Recreation Area today, the north end is in Marin County. We run through Marin County, 60 miles south through San Francisco and down to San Mateo County. The park preserves a number of special resources, from incredible natural resources when we look at Marin County and places where there are areas that have been preserved in perpetuity because of the passion of people who've lived in this area, into the San Francisco area where we have Nike missile sites, we have pre-Civil War era areas, and then down into the south area, San Mateo County, where there are beaches and open spaces that we are so proud to preserve forever.
So enormous natural beauty. Where can dog owners currently walk their dogs off-leash in this area?
You know, currently we're being operated under a policy from 1979, and that allows off-leash dog walking in quite a number of areas. The new proposed rule will allow that to continue in 22 areas where dogs can be walked and 7 specific areas where dogs can be walked off-leash.
And so the 5 areas, for example, in San Francisco, for those who may not be totally familiar, Christie Field, Fort Funston, Ocean Beach, Fort Mason, and the 5th area is Rodeo Beach in Marin. The public anger, though, I think arises from how much of that land will be restricted in terms of where they can walk their dogs freely. For example, in Christie Field and Fort Funston, dog walkers would lose half of the current space.
Christie Field and Fort Funston are, we've heard from the public, one individual who commented to us said, Fort Funston is the Sistine Chapel of off-leash dog walking. It's such a wonderful description. And our intention really is to make sure that we allow off-leash dog walking. There'll be 2 areas at Fort Funston, down along the beach and also in the uplands, where people can continue to walk their dogs off-leash.
But why is it necessary to do this?
It's an interesting proposition when we live in a place like San Francisco or this area where the population is increasing so dramatically. We know this year the population is estimated to be around 7 million people in the Bay Area. 25 years from now, we'll be at 9.2 million people. The same holds true for Golden Gate. When we were first established, we had around 1.4 million visitors who came to Golden Gate. Last year, we had almost 18 million visitors. And we need to make sure that the places that Golden Gate preserves forever for the American people are available for people who have many choices to make, whether they want to recreate by kiteboarding or surfing or running or walking a dog. Our job as a National Park Service is to make sure all of those opportunities are available and to reduce conflicts where we see them currently.
What kinds of problems are the dogs creating? What are you hearing?
The dogs are often very well managed by responsible dog owners who make sure that when the dog is supposed to be on leash, it's kept on leash, or when their waste is supposed to be removed, they do that. But we have enough conflicts that we're concerned that too many people are being knocked over by dogs, bitten by dogs. We hear so many complaints about pet waste. We have instances where even if a dog does something that's negative or attacks an individual, that owner sometimes is embarrassed and hates that it happens, and we want to reduce the opportunities for that to happen by lowering those places where we see conflict today.
Dog owners, though, as you know, are angry about this, and their point is that this area is not like Yosemite or even Yellowstone, where you were the deputy superintendent at one point. Those are wilderness areas, and these rules might work there, but the GGNRA is very much an urban park, and dogs are part of that urban landscape. And I think they're feeling like they had a right to walk their dogs there, and now that right is being taken away from them. How do you respond to that?
You know, this plan is definitely a plan for the future. And I would just remind people that GGNRA is a nationally significant place. And so while people will say it's not like Yellowstone or it's not like Yosemite because it doesn't have the wilderness that those places have, you know, the National Park Service doesn't create parks. That power is reserved for the President and for the Congress of the United States. And when they do that, they do it because they think each of these areas should be preserved for the future for all people.
And so there's a public comment period running through April 25th, is that right?
It's actually been extended 30 days. It will run through May 25th.
And when will the final rules be issued?
We hope to have those final rules issued before the end of the year.
All right. Well, I think you're going to get quite an earful
we will.
during this public comment period.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in. Chris Leonard, Superintendent of the GGNRA.
Thanks.
And that is it for us. Thank you for watching. I'm Thuy Vu. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.